I think during that time frame we had 267 Americans killed, and we didn't kill that many Vietnamese communists, but we were sort of sitting ducks.
You are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
To meet this mounting aggression.
And make no mistake about it, good will prevail.
Where were you born and raised, sir?
Quedlinburg, Germany, 1943.
And your family has a very difficult but interesting story from the end of World War II.
Right. Basically, we were German Catholics that were against Adolf Hitler, and my uncle was in the plot to kill Hitler, Operation Valkyrie, July 20th, 1944, which was unsuccessful. And my uncle Peter Yorck was hung by the Nazis on August 8, 1944 in Berlin. My mother was American, my father was German, and he was in a German tank unit outside Rome, and he got off his tank and went to the Vatican, and the Pope hid him for 2 weeks, and then he worked for the OSS, which is the forerunner of CIA. And then we came to America, Port Washington, Long Island, in 1950.
What was your uncle's role in Operation Valkyrie?
He was under Colonel Stauffenberg. Stauffen was the guy who planted the bomb that exploded, and he was administrator. He was an attorney and a lieutenant, and he was part of the group that when they assassinated Hitler and got rid of the Gestapo, they're going to start a new government, which is basically aristocratic, not bringing back the Kaiser, but it was more upper class aristocratic Germans wanted to take over.
So your family came to America.
Right.
And you settled in Long Island, you said?
Yeah, Port Washington, Long Island, and played football, went to Colgate, joined Marine Corps PLC before there was a lot of anti-war stuff. So 2 summers in 62 and 63 and 65, I went to training at Quantico, Virginia as an enlisted Marine to see what life was like as an enlisted Marine, which was a great experience because it shows you, you're leading enlisted Marines that you want to know how they live. So I came back in the best shape of my life. I played football, I wrestled, and then I went right off to Vietnam in 1967, and then picked up a company down by Way City. And unfortunately, we went to a hill called Con Thien, and we're just sitting on the hill being bombarded by the North Vietnamese. So I think during that time frame, we had 267 Americans killed, and we didn't kill that many Vietnamese communists. But we were sort of sitting ducks, and that was pretty traumatic. It was right by the DMZ. We could see North Vietnam with our telescopes. So we were just trying to make a barrier between North and South Vietnam. It was called the McNamara Line, and it was unsuccessful. And so finally in '68, they forgot about the line, and they just had constant fighting between the Marines and the North Vietnamese Army. There were no civilians in that area, which is good. So we never had problems, running with civilians or killing civilians and stuff like that. It was just Marines against the North Vietnamese Army, which was a very good army. My unit was there for about 3 months, and then we did patrolling around the area. Out of the 30 people in a platoon, the platoon commander is probably number 10, and then you have your senior sergeant who's in the back of the unit, making sure that stragglers don't, get lost, so on and so forth. So you, majority of the time in Vietnam, by the mountains and the jungle, you'd walk Indian file, one behind each other and stuff like that. And we would set up ambushes at night. Interesting thing is the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese did most of their fighting at night, and we would patrol during the daytimes, which in retrospect was a mistake. We should have done more fighting at night. Let's say you're making a perimeter, like the old cowboy movies, that you're in a circle. So what you would do in the perimeter throughout the night, you throw out hand grenades or fire your rifle, because they'd sneak up on you. We'd try to take the high ground. At night we'd try to be on a little hill so we could hear them coming up, but they were very good. They would crawl on their bellies, and a couple of times they penetrated our positions, and that was when all hell broke loose, when they get through the lines, with a small amount of people, 4 to 8 people. but they kill our people when they get through the lines.
And how quickly could you scramble to?
We were ready. We'd have two people in a foxhole. One person was supposed to be awake, and the other person could sleep. You'd maybe get 4 hours of sleep a night. But in retrospect, for instance, my tours were 13 months, and the actual hard fighting, if you put it together, my first tour was maybe half the time was hard fighting. The rest of the time was pretty boring. Second tour, hard fighting was about 3/4 of the time, and then the rest was patrolling, and we'd get up at like 6:30 in the morning, we'd patrol till 4 and be exhausted, and we'd dig in our foxholes and then set for the night and stuff like that. We'd go out for 30 days. The biggest thing was your friends getting killed. You're not fighting, everyone thinks you're fighting for the American flag or the Marine Corps. You're not. You're fighting for the guys next to you. They had one of the saddest thing in my life. I had a corpsman, which is a Navy hospital corpsman who was assigned to me. He sits next to me all the time. We were in a foxhole, and we got hit one night, and he got shot 17 times, and I carried his body back. And I kept in touch with his mother for 42 years. And during that time frame, during my 2.5 years in Vietnam, I lost 18 guys killed. We killed a lot of enemy, but losing those Americans was pretty tough. And I did have PTSD for quite a while afterwards.
Let's talk about the second one. How did your role change? What were you doing specifically there?
Platoon commander and the chain of thing is about 30 people. Company commander is about 200 people. Battalion commander, which I did before I went to Desert Storm, is about 700 to 1,000 people. So I had about 238 Marines, about 5 corpsmen with us, and we were in 1969. We were fighting north of Van de Griff, fighting against the North Vietnamese, and that was Second World War. Pitched, we'd take a hill, they'd take a hill. So for about 2 months, it was heavy hand-to-hand combat, and that was pretty gruesome. Well, as the commanding officer, you've got to set the role. So you've got to pretend that you're not afraid of the situation. You've got to set the example. For instance, in the field, people didn't want to shave. Well, the Marine Corps said everyone has to shave in the field, so guys had to shave in the field, had to wear their uniform somewhat squared away, have some discipline. We never saluted in the field. We always went by our last name, so we never would be Captain Yorck or Lieutenant Smith or Sergeant so-and-so. It would be Yorck, Smith, Hazeman, so on and so forth. But it was a tight unit, and I'm very proud of my time in 1969. That was the highlight of my younger years in the Marine Corps.
Between your second and third tours, you spent time in Cuba. Tell me a little bit about that side.
Interesting. I went to Guantanamo, Cuba, and then later on in life I became an analyst for a Defense Intelligence Agency on Cuba. And at one time in 1980, we were thinking about invading Cuba. We did not do that, but I learned a lot about Castro. He comes from an upper-class background. He was an illegitimate son of a doctor. He wore a watch on each arm. One was Cuban time and one was Moscow time. And I really liked that type of stuff. So after I came back from Vietnam in 1970, I went to Columbia University and majored in political science, international affairs.
Tell me a little bit more about the almost invasion of Cuba in 1980. I don't think most people know that.
Yeah, it was called the Mariel. They had all the immigrants coming over, and what he was doing, all his prisoners had their tongues tattooed. So they'd have, if you were, let's say, a rapist, you'd have 2 dots on your tongue. If you were a murderer, you have 3. So he emptied out all his prisons, and they had good Cubans, but then also the criminal element came to Miami, and so there was a huge influx of Cubans that came to Florida, and at one time America was considering amphibious invasion to get rid of Castro.
As you build up with each of these tours, you're responsible for more and more people. Talk about how that responsibility grew and how it maybe changed how you made decisions.
It's a great question. Basically, you get, as a company commander, you see the big picture. So I had 3 platoon commanders that had 30 men each. Then I had a machine gun unit. Basically, I know I'm a history buff, and I know a lot about the German army because my family has been in the German army for 300 years. And the German army was good because the staff NCOs were excellent, and the men feared the staff NCOs more than they feared the enemy. So you want to have respect. You don't want to be friends with the troops, but they have to respect you. You have to be fair, and that's the way I ran it. So my nickname behind my back was the Beast. So after I finished my tour in 1969, the Marines were being pulled out. It was under the Nixon administration. They decided to downsize the military presence. But the CIA had an operation called Operation Pheonix, and that was run out of Saigon. And there was a Colonel Terrence Allen who was in charge, a Marine Corps colonel, and he liked me, and he said, Yorck, would you like to come down and be an advisor to the South Vietnamese police/reconnaissance unit? And I said, sure, and flew down to Saigon from North Vietnam. Vietnam at that time, South Vietnam was 700 miles long, a population of 18 million people. Now Vietnam has a population of 80 million people. So the growth is unbelievable. So we went down there, and he said, the province I have is Bin Long province, and that's about 100 miles north of Saigon, and it borders on the Cambodian border, and that's where the supplies are coming in from the North Vietnamese. The Ho Chi Minh Trail, as you've heard, was not in Vietnam. It was in Laos and Cambodia, and then it would bring supplies down down the trail to the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese army. So I said, I'd love to do it. So we flew out there, and it was an old rubber plantation. It was a Michelin rubber plantation that was still operative. The French had paid bribes to the Viet Cong so they wouldn't burn down the rubber trees. And so doing my whole tour there, the French had Vietnamese working on the rubber trees. And then at the end of the war in 1975, there were Michelin plantations, and the rubber was being used to make tires. That was taken over by the communist government. So I thought it was a pretty interesting situation. So I had 35 Vietnamese, and about 10 Montagnards were the mountain people in the hills, and then about 10 Cambodians. And we would get our orders to locate and neutralize suspected communists. And I was living right next to the CIA headquarters in Bin Long. It's close to An Loc. And it was a great relationship. I had a lot of respect for the Vietnamese. I happened to be Roman Catholic. And I thought the Vietnam War had something a lot of people didn't know about. It was a religious war. The Catholics in South Vietnam ran the country. President Diem's brother was the bishop of Saigon, and most of the officers and the government employees were Catholics, the people who sided with the French. So I'd say about 20% of the population was Catholic, and the rest was Buddhist, or they have Ao Dai and Ho Ho, which is a special, like Mormonism in the United States. So it was a great relationship. I worked well with the Vietnamese. In fact, the district chief played tennis, and I was a terrible tennis player. When I played with him, once a week, and intentionally lost the game, so he could win the bottle of scotch. But we would get basically target lists of suspected Vietnamese tax collectors. The communists had a hidden government. During the daytime, the South Vietnamese ran the show, but at night, again, the communists had their own situation, and they taxed the people, and that's how they were successful.
So how did you target these communists?
We'd get a list. It's interesting. This is the beginning of CIA, beginning of IBM computers, and we'd get a target list. They have huge central computers in Saigon, and the information is as good as it can get. So sometimes we were a little bit suspected. Whether political animosities between people, and so someone would say he's a communist or not. But we'd get a target list of, let's say, 10, 15 people a week, and then we'd go out, arrest them, turn them over to the South Vietnamese for interrogation. They either come back to the town being cleared, or they'd go to prison. We did not kill anybody. We did not do any atrocities and stuff like that. So, I was just a small cog in the machine of, at that time, probably 250,000 Marines, but the friendship I made with all ranks and stuff like that, and I'm still friends with guys I knew in the 60s. We have reunions. We have a big reunion coming up this year. I try to help a lot of veterans get disability for post-traumatic stress and now prostate cancer, which comes from Agent Orange. It's the central theme of my life. Afterwards, I worked 28 years for Xerox, but compared to the Marine Corps was a better experience, I think.